Okay, let us turn to Unit 4. That begins on page 51 of your syllabus. And Unit 4, in my view, is just critically important because there are a few ideas here that we introduce to the students. We want them to understand well and master because it does become the building block for many of the later units. And as I mentioned in the introduction, Unit 4 is summarizing a reference, or what we more commonly think of as writing reports. And I mentioned that many of us had that experience of writing reports where you kind of just, read till you find a pretty good sentence, copy that sentence but change a couple words, and then find another pretty good one and copy and read, copy, change, read, copy, change, read, copy, change, so you have enough. And that was maybe illegal or too close to plagiarism, but we really didn't have any other way to move a fact from there to here without copying a huge chunk of it. And I think a lot of students have that kind of angst. The idea is not an entirely bad one. You just want to reverse the process. So rather than copying a whole sentence and changing a few words, what we now know how to do is copy a few words into a keyword outline and then change whole sentences with dress-ups and openers and stylistic techniques. So, gave me a little bit of peace of mind. Now, we have two ideas here that are going to shape our understanding of Unit 4. And the first idea is length. Length will give you or help you determine a structure. So if I say, Beth, you have to write a report. Do you have any questions? How long? I mean, that would either about what or how long. Those would be the first two questions you would have. And a lot of times you might think, oh, well, the student is asking that because they want to do the minimum and get done with it, which in some cases might be true, but it's actually a much more important and enlightened question. Because if you don't have a target length, you don't know how much information to collect up and how to organize it. Now, historically, in your experience, how have students been given assignments in terms of length? Or how were you when you were in school? What do you remember? What's common? Yeah, number of words is common, say, in elementary school. Essay contests are very often in number of words. Sometimes there's a range, like 250 to 500, or sometimes there's a maximum, 500 max. Sometimes there's a minimum, 700 minimum. Now, in high school and college, what's the more common? Pages. Yeah, so let's say write a 3-page paper or something. Unfortunately, these are probably the worst two or least useful, least helpful to the student ways to give assignments. Because if you say write a certain number of words, what will the student spend a great deal of time doing? Yeah, they'll count up and say, okay, I've got 121, I need 500. 500 minus 121 would be 379. Write 17 more words, 379 minus 17, right? Now, that would be the old style. Now you just look at the bottom of your Word document and it tells you how many words you've got. But the problem there is you're really thinking more about writing until you have enough rather than how are you organizing and presenting ideas, right? So I don't recommend that you give students assignments that way. Although other people might, I think you can help the students translate that into something more useful. How about pages? If you say write a certain number of pages, what's likely to happen then?
Graphic design.
Yeah, see, in our day, before there were computers and homes and printers and things, you had to kind of make the loops wide and slanty on the paper, and you could fill up a whole line with 3 words if you stretch out your cursive. I remember middle school pulling that trick. Now, of course, the kids are playing with their font size and their margin width and their spacing and their font and their picas. I mean, you can get very, very fancy. So to counter that, most schools will give a style guide and say, Times Roman 12-point Microsoft Word default margins double space MLA format, or something like that, right? Which is actually very helpful because then the students don't have to waste any time messing with their font size and their margin width, right? And it's also helpful for the teachers because I don't know a single teacher who wants to read an essay printed in Daniela font, or worse, Gothic. I actually had a student who turned in an essay printed in 16-point Gothic. And I said, what is this? He said, it's my essay. I don't want to read this. He said, I like it. I said, I'm grading it. Give me a better copy to read. So, but most of the time, though, you're still dealing with quantity rather than an organizational concept. So I recommend that you give assignments to students in number of paragraphs, because that is an organizational unit. So if you know how many paragraphs you need, then you know how many topics you need, and you can know how many details to collect up about that topic. And I also point out to kids, if they ever get a teacher, and I'm sure none of you would ever do this, but if your students ever bump into a teacher who says this about length, your paper should be long enough to cover the subject. They should get out, they should run from that teacher, because the teacher is asking the student to do something which is not possible, right? It is never possible to, quote, cover the subject. Why? Because anything could be any length. I could write one sentence about Texas, couldn't I? Texas is big. Period. End of story. That's all you need to know. I could write one paragraph about Texas. I could write one chapter of a book about Texas. I could write 3 books about Texas, right? Anything can be any size. You could take the most obscure little thing you could find, right? You could write a 20-page research paper on dry erase markers. Couldn't you? Don't you think there's enough information? The design and the patenting and the chemical components and the environmental impacts and the future of alternatives to, right? You could take the most obscure thing you could find and spin it out for 180 pages. That would be a doctoral dissertation. So if a teacher says your paper should be long enough to cover the subject, they're essentially saying, I'm not going to help you enough to know what is probably appropriate. You have to mind read me and kind of guess what I think would be an appropriate amount of information. And if you do that, then you're successful and you got lucky and I'll reward you. And if you don't, well, then you'll suffer, right? It's a form of tyranny to ask someone to do something which is not possible. We know this from fairy tales, right? So that's just kind of an aside point, but I think it's important because they're out there. Kids bump into it. So I recommend paragraphs. Now, if you're going to say, write a certain number of paragraphs, you have to define a paragraph. You have to have a model. You have to show them what you mean by paragraph. So this is where you outline purists can breathe a sigh of relief, because we're now going to assign the Roman numeral in the outline the job of holding the topic sentence. Okay? So now that first sentence, that first statement is going to be the topic of the paragraph. And then you're going to essentially define the paragraph length by number of details. Number of details. And you can almost go by grade level up to a certain point. 3rd grade, 3 details in a paragraph, probably just great. 4th grade, 4 or 5. Middle school, 5, 6. Even at high school level, I don't like to go above about 7 or 8 because, let's face it, some people write 240-word paragraphs, but nobody likes reading them. So a limit, that's the key. And I usually give them a range of 1. So I'll say 3 or 4, 4 or 5, 6 or 7. That way, if they're making their outline and they get 6 and they think that's about all the stuff I can find that's interesting or worth telling, okay, they can stop. But if they get 6 and they say, ooh, there's one more really interesting thing I can put in, then they have that flexibility. So I usually give a range of 1 up to about that. Now, how many of you have learned that a topic sentence should, that a paragraph should have a topic sentence? Okay, most people. How many of you also learned at one point that a paragraph should have a concluding sentence? Yep, usually same people. I'm not opposed to the term concluding sentence per se, but I think it's kind of lost its oomph. I mean, really, by definition, any sentence that was at the end of the paragraph would be the concluding one, would it not? And sometimes as teachers, we can be a little vague. You know, I'm guilty of this, and it irritates students because you'll say things like, well, you know, the concluding sentence should sort of wrap it up. You know, tie it together. You know, make it cohesive. You know. And maybe you don't know, whatever. So, we use a different word, but it's the same idea you may have learned, and that is the word clincher. Because it kind of sounds like it does something, right? Clincher, kind of like a mix between clench and pinch, like a crab on steroids or something. And in order to be sure that it wraps it up, ties it together, and makes it cohesive, we have a little rule that we state. You see it on the poster there, and that is that the topic sentence and the clincher sentence should repeat or reflect 2 to 3 key words. Okay? Let's say it together. I'd like you to memorize it so you can teach it easily to your students. The topic sentence and the clincher sentence. Now the next word is must, so you make a fist. Must. See, that'll remind you. Then you say this part. Repeat or reflect 2 or 3 key, like you're opening a door, key words. All right, let's try the whole thing together, and everybody do the gestures. Now I know, some of you will feel awkward because you're old, but 10-year-olds eat this up, I guarantee it. So let's learn the gestures. The topic sentence and the clincher sentence. See, it works. Repeat or reflect 2 or 3 key words. Good. By the way, if you are trying to help students memorize anything, if you affix gestures to the words you're trying to memorize, you will memorize much faster because you're using more of your brain to store the information. Then once you've got it memorized, you can just hold your body still and not dance around like crazy and look more normal, although inside you're kind of twitching. Now, how exactly would this topic clincher rule work? Well, let's say that you're writing a little humorous piece on foods, different types of foods. And you have one paragraph that talks about the most delicious food, which is, of course, Haagen-Dazs coffee ice cream. Another paragraph about the most nutritious of all foods, which I'm sure you would agree is organic grass-fed beef. And then a third paragraph on the most disgusting of all foods, which for many of us would include eggplant. So, your topic sentence, eggplant is the most disgusting of all foods. Then you can tell how it tastes like rubber and tastes like sawdust and chews like rubber. You got to bury it in tomato sauce and cheese just to be able to choke it down. It only grows in the worst parts of the world, and anybody who eats it is destined to die. Then in your clincher, you could repeat or reflect. Now, repeat is when you use the exact same word. Eggplant, I don't know any synonyms for that, so eggplant. But disgusting, you might have some possible synonyms, and you could reflect. So you might say, eggplant is the most repulsive of foods, or the atrocious substance, or the vilest of vegetables, or right? So it's a combination, repeat using the same word or reflect using a synonym. And usually 2 or 3 is a good balance. That establishes the connection. Now, it's really interesting, this rule. It is a powerful, powerful rule. And the first year I was teaching this program, after having learned it in Canada, I had a little group of children. They were my two oldest daughters. They were 12 and 10, and their friends. So I had this little gaggle of 10, 11-year-old, 12-year-old kids, girls mostly, and I made them follow this rule slavishly. I made them, highlight in their topic sentence and their clincher sentence the keywords that repeat or reflect. I just wouldn't accept it if they didn't follow the rule. And I remember reading their little reports thinking, wow, this sounds so organized and intelligent. It sounds more organized and intelligent than these children actually are. I was amazed. I went that next summer up to Canada, and I said, Dr. Webster, this topic clincher rule, it's brilliant. It works so well. How did you come up with it? And he went into this diatribe. Well, these university students that take history class, they'd start on one thing, and then there'd be an indentation. You don't know why. They're still talking about the same darn thing. Then they'd switch topic in the middle of the thing, and this is all mushed together, and you just can't teach history to people who write like that. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Although I know why he had the problem. I remember learning how to make a paragraph in 3rd grade. Do you remember? How do you actually create a paragraph? Indent. 2 fingers, right? So I would write my reports. Find a pretty good sentence, copy, change a couple words, read, copy, change, it feels like it might be time to indent. Okay, indent. Turn the page, read, copy, change. I haven't indented for a while. Let's do that. And that was my life. I mean, I did that in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. That was the trick. Just indent when you feel like it. Then I did pretty much virtually nothing in high school. And then I went, first time I heard, now I'm not saying nobody tried to teach me, but the first time I heard that a paragraph should have a topic was in English 102 at San Francisco State University. The first time I heard that a paragraph should stay on one topic was when I met Webster in teacher training and learned the topic clincher rule. And when I do this, and my editor knows, sometimes I try to fudge on it, but when I follow this rule, I sound more organized and intelligent than I actually am. You can also rescue yourself from a serious diversion, right? You could get way off topic. You could be, over in Parmigiano, Italy, where the children run around barefoot in the sewers and the nematodes crawl into their toenails and get into their bloodstream. And if you stop right there, the poor reader is going to think, what was this about? But if you just tack on a clincher and say, so clearly eggplant is the most disgusting of all possible foods, the reader will forgive your digression because you sounded like you knew exactly what you're talking about. Now, I'm not saying you should have the digression, but you can rescue yourself. So this is a very, very powerful rule. And when you get to Unit 4, I find that if you just kind of force this, just make them do it. If they can't figure it out, just dictate to them how to do it. If they get this idea solid, it serves them well all along. And one teacher I knew, Lori, she had some kids who were kind of having a tough time understanding it. So she told them, just write the exact same sentence at the end and change a couple words. Use a thesaurus, change a couple words. Now, that's not the ideal way to teach, but if you had to get the point across, that would be a good starting point. One thing that the Canadians used to do that I don't think is the better way is they used to have the kids put the same words here in the topic, and then put those same words here in the clincher. I have found that if you just put the word clincher as a reminder to follow the rule, then when they get to the end of the paragraph, they can read the first sentence and look for some words that they could fit into the last sentence, and it's more flexible and less likely to seem too redundant or repetitive in that way. So that's the reminder sign. Now, the other problem that we have is also one of length and quantity, but not the length of our paper. We can define that by number of paragraphs. The problem we have is the length of the source material, right? So if I said, Beth, you have to write a report. You said about what? I said elephants. You said how long? And I gave you a certain number of paragraphs, and you dutifully went to the encyclopedia or looked up elephants in some book. How much do you think you would find? pages and pages and pages, right? So the problem with summarizing references really is that there's too much information, right? Too much information. And we also have the problem of being accurate regarding our facts. Now, how many of you were a little bit frustrated by the infrasound in elephants because you could only have 3 words and you felt like you couldn't be accurate? Anyone have that feeling? I did that on purpose because I wanted to break you of your habit of, I have to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God. But it does mean that you need a slightly more flexible system when you're taking notes in order to be sure that you don't mess up the facts. So we have 2 changes that happen here. The first change is that the key words, okay, the key words or the notes are from facts, not sentences. Okay? Facts, not sentences. What does that mean? Is it possible for one sentence to have 2 facts in it? Yeah, absolutely. A compound sentence probably would. Blah, 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 and do-do-do-do. In that case, you've got 2 facts, and if you wanted to use both of those facts, you could do that. You could take 3 or 4 keywords from the first half of the sentence and 3 or 4 keywords from the second half of the sentence because you're looking for facts, not sentences. Is it possible that one sentence could contain 3 facts? Sure. Compound sentence with a long clause attached. You could imagine taking 9 and at the higher level up to 12 keywords from one sentence divided into 3 discrete facts. So that allows us a little more flexibility and being accurate. And I always say to the students, if you can't fit one fact into 3 keywords, you probably have more than one fact. So split it again. So that makes your life a little bit easier, except for the problem that there's too many facts, right? So you want to have a system for limiting the number of facts, and that's where the paragraph model serves you well. You're going to have probably more than you need, so you're going to have to choose some and ignore others. Now, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I have noticed that children generally, students, mostly of all ages, do not like that word, summarize. Have you noticed this? It's not a positive word. I think part of the problem is it's a very fuzzy word, right? And I thought about it for a while, and I finally figured out why this is a bad word. It's spelled wrongly. I mean, technically, that's the way it's spelled. But the problem for kids is if they learn even a little bit of math, they get that word sum, which means what? The total, all of something. So then they look at that and they think, okay, what I'm supposed to do now is tell all that in this much space. Because I'm supposed to summarize it. But nobody can tell all that in this much space. You can only tell some of it, which is why properly spelled, the word would look like this. S-O-M-E hyphen A hyphen R-I-Z-E. Isn't that nice? Because that's what you're doing. You're not telling all of it, you're telling some of it. You are summarizing. And you can, I give you total permission to show that idea to your students and pretend you thought of it. I don't mind at all. But it frees them up. Okay, I've got too many facts. I have to choose some and leave others. That's the task. Now, how to choose? That becomes the next question. The choice becomes harder as the facts increase in quantity. So if you have a source text that has 10 facts and you want 5, That's not too hard, is it? But if you have a source text that has 20 facts and you want 5, that's a tougher choice. If you have a source text that has 50 facts and you want 7 or 8, now you're really having to make choices, and it's harder. So when you teach this to students, be sure that you try to find sources to start with that are a little bit larger than what you want to end with, like the 10-to-5 ratio, and then gradually expand out to something with more, and then gradually say, okay, use whatever you can find. But saying use whatever you can find is kind of dangerous because it could be overwhelming. Now, how to choose? That's what they want to know, because they want to know, what will make you happy, what will get them a good grade, what will help them be successful in the assignment, right? So this then brings us to an interesting point, kind of teaching philosophy, I guess. I always tell the students, I want you to choose what you believe, what you think is interesting, or what you think is important. And if the students are old enough to understand the word in the context of writing, I'll also throw in a third one, relevant. But that's kind of more of a second tier idea there, because that implies you've got some focus or purpose. If you're just basically telling facts, writing a report without a specific focus or purpose, what's interesting or important? Now, I happen to be the kind of teacher who firmly believes that what is interesting is actually more interesting than what's important. I have met teachers, though, who are firmly convinced that what is important is more important than what's interesting. Now, you can be whatever kind of teacher you like, but I would ask one question. In the perspective of writing, how am I likely to get more engaged kids and better writing out of them? By letting them choose what they think is interesting, or trying to get them to choose what they think I think is important? Sure, interesting. Plus, try a little thought experiment here. Think back to when you were in 3rd grade. Just remember something from 3rd grade. If you can't, try 4th. Now ask yourself, this little thing you're remembering, is this interesting or important? Yeah, 9 times out of 10, it's the interesting thing that sticks with you years later. So you learn things that are interesting. And I mentioned yesterday in the introduction how I had these 2 feelings about writing reports. One was, it's kind of not fair because the encyclopedia got all the good words. The other thing that I had thinking going while I was writing this report is, this is really dumb. If anyone actually wanted to know about Japan, they should just read the encyclopedia. Did I mention that? Because there wasn't really any purpose. But you see, if the teacher had said to me, Andy, class, I am interested to find out what you think is interesting about Japan, then there would have been a purpose. Oh, the teacher wants to know what I find interesting. What do I think? Right? The danger, of course, is that if you give children the freedom to choose, they may choose other than the way you like. Right? So, this is where Webster's edict comes in. Dr. Webster lived very strongly and even taught his graduate students by this rule, essentially, and it was hands-on structure and style, hands-off content. In other words, if you follow the models, follow the checklists, follow the procedure, and learn what I'm trying to get you to learn, I will not pester you about what you choose to write about. I will give freedom here. And it's very easy to get sucked into this trap. This is a teaching trap. You see a student and you say, oh, that's a great outline you've got going there. But do you really think this fact you chose here is as important as this one that you didn't choose? And you know, this is okay, but if you were to choose this one, it would fit so nicely with that other one, wouldn't it? And I'm not sure you could do justice to the subject here without choosing this rather important fact. Do you? You can be the nicest person in the world, right? But if you teach that way, you'll get two results. One result, a better report. Why? Because you put your sensibility, your maturity, your perspective, you can organize ideas better because you're older, right? So you get a better report, but you're also likely to get an unwanted side effect, which would be a student who the next time says, oh, I guess I don't really know. I'll just wait for the teacher to tell me what I should choose, right? So I would argue that in Unit 4, especially when it's something like, you know, plants or animals or people or countries or states, stuff that kids sometimes write about, the fact that they choose and run with it is more important than what they choose. Now, you can disagree with me on that if you like, but I am right. No. What I would say is this. If you're writing a report and you think there's something really important they should include, just tell them. Just say, be sure you include these 3 really important things, and after that you can put whatever you want, right? And their desire is to make you happy. Their desire is to do it up to your expectation. So be sure those expectations are clear. But I try to live on Webster's edict, and hands-on structure and style, hands-off content. And it's kind of hard, especially, you know, if you're reading your own children writing saying, I really don't agree with this. Okay, let it go, right? Is that helpful? All right, so let's take a look at the process now. I have said to Beth there, Beth, you have to write a report. She said about what? I said elephants. She said, how long? I said, well, Beth, I'm a really nice teacher, and this is due before lunch today, so you can choose. You can do 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, or 12 paragraphs. What would you like? 1, okay. 1 is a good answer for our purposes, but the process would be the same. It would just be replicated for more paragraphs. Okay, so Beth dutifully goes over to her antique, actual made-on-paper World Book Encyclopedia, and she looks up elephants. And there's 11 pages of information about elephants. And encyclopedias are so handy because they are naturally divided into topics. That's one reason why I wish that the paper encyclopedia would not die. Unfortunately, it has. Nobody's printing them anymore. But you can flip the pages and you can see the topics, and it's actually easier to get a grasp of the whole than navigating, you know, pages on a computer. But so she's looking at for some of the possible topics. What do you think you might find in the World Book? All right, kinds of elephants, habitat. All right, family and social groups. Say again? Okay, or we'll just say body. Yeah, body and appearance.
Infrasound.
Infrasound. All right, diet. Domestication, good. Okay, so there'd be a lot of possible topics. Now, would Beth or anyone be wise to try and write a little bit about everything about elephants in 1 or 2 or 3 paragraphs? No, if you wanted to write a little bit about everything about elephants, you'd have to write quite a larger number of paragraphs. But she wants to do just 1. That was the assignment. So she'll pick 1 and ignore the others, right? So if you turn to page 60, you will see the excerpt from the 2014 World Book Encyclopedia on kinds of elephants. Now, just looking at that page, just kind of scanning it, what would you think in terms of number of facts, discrete kind of bits of information? How many do you think are there? Just ballpark it. 40? Yeah, probably about right. I think I counted it once, and there's somewhere 35 to 40, depending on how you divide them up. So our funnel is pretty wide. 30-some, 40 facts, and we want to write one paragraph, right? So we have to choose some facts, ignore others, because our goal is to summarize. And our criteria is what? We want to choose what is interesting, important, or relevant. All right, now we see the heading, kinds of elephants, so that's going to give us a possible topic sentence there. We also kind of notice there's the African and the Asian, so that would indicate there are two kinds of elephants. So let's start there. We can always modify this differently, but two kinds elephants. So our goal is to write one paragraph about two kinds of elephants. Now, there's kind of two basic ways to do this. There's the time-consuming, meticulous, excellent student way, often preferred by girls. And that's where you read it through once just to get a sense of it. Then you read it through again with a highlighter, highlighting things that look interesting or important. Or if you can't write in it because it's your nice encyclopedia, maybe putting a light pencil mark or a yellow sticky arrow on those things that look interesting or important. Then you transfer those facts into your outline, and then before you're finished, you read it through one more time, just to be sure you did not miss anything that was truly interesting or important. That is the time-consuming, meticulous, excellent student way. There is another way. It is the way often preferred by boys. This is where you read until you find something interesting, important, put it in the outline, find another interesting thing, and when you've got enough, you're finished. Now, rest assured, when I teach students, I model them with the way where you read it through and mark in the margin and then select the facts. But since we're on a bit of a schedule here, and I'm a boy, we're going to do it the latter way. So, we're going to start reading. African elephants are larger than Asian elephants. Is that interesting or important? Well, anything large kind of grabs me, right? So we'll just throw that right in there. African, larger, Asian. All right. Wild African elephants live only in Africa south of the Sahara. Duh. An African elephant is about the same height at the shoulder and the rump. Boring. It's backed up slightly in the middle. Boring. Adult African bull male elephants stand about 11 feet tall at the shoulder and weigh about 12,000 pounds. Boring. The cows are about 9 feet tall and weigh about 8,000 pounds. Boring. Now you have to be careful with the boys because sometimes they'll just be boring, 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 boring. I am so sorry. The whole thing is just boring. There isn't a single interesting fact here. I'm sorry I can't do this. So at some point you maybe have to just bite the bullet and choose something whether you really think it's interesting or not. The largest known elephant, an African bull, measured 13 feet 2 inches tall. Well, the largest of anything. That kind of grabs you, doesn't it? All right. We'll put largest African bull, 13 feet 2 inches tall. The heaviest elephant ever weighed was over 14,500 pounds. 7 tons. I know my math. All right, moving on. Most African elephants have dark gray skin. So what? Their forehead forms a smooth curve. Really? I couldn't care less. Their ears measure as wide as 5 feet and cover their shoulders. 4 feet. Did I say 5 feet? Their ears measure as wide as 4 feet and cover their shoulders. That's pretty big ears. Ears, 4 feet, cover shoulders. Both the bulls and cows have tusks. The females are armed. Bulls, cows, tusks. Bulls and cows, tusks. Okay, now I see a little problem developing here. Do you see the problem that's developing? I have 7 possible slots, and I'm supposed to be writing about the 2 kinds of elephants, but I've used 3 or 4 of them about the African. So now I have to make some choices. One possible option would be to determine that I cannot possibly write only 1 paragraph. I'm going to have to write 2 paragraphs. One about the African, one about the Asian. So I'm going to have to cross out that, move that up, collect 3 or 4 more facts about the African, and then go do that for the Asian too. Not likely. Another option would be to redefine my paragraph. I can redefine the topic and just say, I've decided I'm not going to write about the 2 kinds of elephants. I'm just going to write about the African elephant, and I'm not going to include anything about the Asian. So I cross that out, move that up, pick 3 or 4 more facts on the African, and I could do that. The third option would be to say, well, there's too many facts. I can't tell everything there is to tell about the African or the Asian. So why don't I just go pick up 3 facts about the Asian, stick it in there, and be done with it? And since that requires the least amount of effort on my part, that is probably what I would do. So I skip down to the Asian elephant section. Now, some of you are looking at me, but you didn't even read it. My answer is, don't need to. I have things to do. All right. Asian elephants live only in southern and southeastern Asia. Duh. They are found in forests and jungles of Cambodia, China, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Vietnam. Asian elephants have an arched back that is slightly higher than the shoulder and the rump. Whoop-de-doo. An adult Asian bull stands from 9 to 10 feet tall at the shoulder, weighs up to 8,000 pounds. Well, that's shrimpy. The largest known Asian bull measured 10 feet 8 inches tall, still shrimpy. Asian cows stand about 8 feet tall, really shrimpy. Most Asian elephants have light gray skin and may have pink or white spots. Pink spotted elephants? That's interesting. All right, so Asian elephants have lighter skin with pink or white. Oh no, I'm out of words. Just draw some spots. There we go. An Asian elephant has 2 humps on its forehead just above the ears. The ears are about half as large as those of an African elephant and do not cover the shoulder. Oh, that teacher. He's been talking about compare and contrast. I bet he would be very impressed if I compare the ears. Do you think? So Asians have ears 1/2 size of the Africans and do not cover the shoulders. I'm getting handy with my symbols there. All right, need 1 more fact and we can be done with it. Most Asian bulls have tusks that grow from 4 to 5 feet long. However, some males called makmas have no tusks and many Asian females have none. Other Asian females have extremely short tusks called Tushes? Tushes? That's got to win. All right, so Asian females, most are tuskless, although some have short tushes. Ah, there we go. Now, have I chosen what you think are the most important facts about these elephants? Maybe, maybe not. But again, I would argue the fact that I chose them is going to get me much more engaged in telling you about it, isn't it? So that's kind of the approach that we would take with Unit 4. And if you can remember that funnel idea, if you start with a source text that has only a few more facts than you need, then the limiting skill, develops easily at first, then a few more, then a few more. And we at IEW have really been working to put together, both for the classroom teacher with our classroom supplements as well as the theme-based writing lesson books, appropriate sized source text for use in Unit 4 to teach this skill of limiting, of summarizing by choosing some facts but not all, organizing into the topic, clinch your paragraph, and then of course the kids can write from there. Does that all make pretty good sense? All right, let's see if you have any questions about this process so far, and then we'll go ahead and do the practicum session where you get to write out the paragraph. So, any questions? Anything so far, Unit 4? Yes?
Okay, you may have answered this earlier. I'm just wondering if when I go to write, can I move my details around?
Yes, absolutely. I did say that in my world, I'm really okay if the summary or the story or the final version doesn't match the outline in a particular way. And when you do this, you may well see how you want to reorganize the sequence of the facts to make more sense or for a particular purpose. So yes, you have complete freedom in doing that. And I tend to be very, very liberal in that way. I have met, like I said, some teachers who want it to match because of the discipline. I just want them to do it. After they've done it, I'm pretty happy with whatever they do with it. Yeah. Good question. Anyone else? Question? Yes?
As they transfer their outline to a paragraph, is your recommendation that they add the dress-ups as they go? Or should they do the paragraph and then add the dress-ups, or does it matter?
Okay, very good question. Should students use the dress-ups and put in whatever style techniques they've learned as they go, or should they write it and wait to the end? Now, if you get that question from a student, it's a pretty strong indicator that you taught them too much too fast. Because what they're thinking is maybe what you were thinking yesterday or what you're going to think in a few minutes. Oh, this is so much to think about. If I could just write it out and then figure out the dress-ups, that would be easier. But if you followed the formula, what is it? EZ plus 1, you shouldn't really have that problem. I have also met a few boys who figured this out. I'm not saying you should ever teach this to anyone, but it's kind of smart, when you think about it. There are two kinds of elephants, which are the huge, quality adjective, dress up right there, African, and the smaller Asian. I have met kids who will write their draft on top of the keyword outline, fitting in every single dress up, so all they then have to do is just type it up once. Now, I would never encourage that, but you do have to respect the intelligence, the efficiency of the mind that would come up with that system, right? Wow, if I just do that, there's a whole bunch of words I don't have to write out. So I think what you'll find is that the answer to your question isn't yes or no, but it's a gradually changing process where, as they become easier, they happen more naturally. And as they do it more, the students will start to look for chances. And they just say, oh, that's a perfect place to put the which. Oh, that'll be my very short sentence. They'll start thinking like that gradually over time. But yeah, again, if you get that question from your student, it's because you taught too much too fast, probably. Good. Any other questions? Yes, Maureen.
I'm glad she brought up style. If they include a quality adjective, ly word, strong verb, whatever, that's in the keyword outline, in effect, they pulled it out of the source text.
Yes.
Can they still count that?
Absolutely.
As part? Okay.
Yes. In fact, some students will do that. They will actually look in the source text and say, ooh, that's a good strong verb. And they'll put it in the keyword outline so they can use it in their paragraph and underline strong verb. Why would that not bother me? They're recognizing it. They're using it. They're moving it maybe from their passive into their active vocabulary. So I've never had any rule that you have to think up this word on your own, right? Because that echoes to me that awful injunction from the teacher. Put it in your own words. Well, what if this is the best one, right? Why not use it? Nobody owns words. Does that answer the question? Good question. Anyone? One more. Yes, Erin.
Going along those same lines with a child who's learning the dress-ups with the keyword outlines and we're introducing them, would you recommend brainstorming where things can fit while they're working on the keyword outline and then writing the draft, kind of the opposite of what the other question was?
I wouldn't object to it, but I don't find that it's really necessary to do with a group if you're working with a group. If you have an individual student and you're working with individually and they're having real trouble figuring out how to put in a quality adjective or a which clause or something, I might do that on an individual basis, but I don't, at this point, if you followed the easy plus one, you shouldn't really have to do that in order for all the students to be successful. It's important when you're teaching groups of children to kind of filter them towards independence. The idea that everybody should be doing the same thing in the same way at the same time is kind of one of the biggest problems we have in institutional education. Wouldn't you agree? So even if you're in a classroom where everybody kind of is at the same level, they are going to operate at different reading and writing and aptitudes. So it's okay for people to be doing different levels of independence or checklists. As I mentioned yesterday, you can take your top kids, give them the extra next thing on the checklist, but don't tell everybody. Let them have that challenge. Take your low end and cross off something on their checklist. Let them work with what's easy for a little while longer before you put the +1 in. And that's okay. So in a group of kids, you can have different levels of checklists. You can also have different levels of independence. So for example, we did this one together. Okay, we'll write it out. Okay, next one. Well, you guys here, you're the sharp group. You probably had got the hang of this from once or twice. So I could give you an article and say, okay, you're on your own. Choose your facts, make your outline, write the summary. I'm going to help the rest of everybody over here, and we're going to do it one more time together. That's okay. That's okay. Then maybe the next group, right, is starting to get the hang of it. So you say, okay, here's source text, you guys do this. Here's the source text, you've got the hang of it. If you have a problem, ask them. I'm going to help these folks, and we're going to do it one more time together. And so you can kind of filter the students towards independence. And you can do that with every unit. And it's very possible, depending on who you're teaching and how it's all working and how much time you have, that you might not get everyone in a group to complete independence by the end of that unit. But remember, that's okay. That's okay, because the idea is we're going to be doing this, year after year. Next year, everything's going to be more familiar, easier, It's going to be layered and getting deeper in their understanding. And so you don't have to worry that someone is just not quite getting it as well as someone else. That's just going to be natural for teaching groups of students, right? I would point out in the book, I skipped over a few things, but I would like to point them out to you. On page 56, we have some examples for you to look at. This is a fifth grade student, and here we see the original source text, which is probably somewhere in the range of, I don't know, 14, 16 facts, I'm not quite sure. And this student, Bethany, made her outline to limit it to 6, and then she made her summary using dress-ups that she had learned. The keywords in the topic and clincher are bolded or highlighted if it's on handwritten paper. And so she truly has a little summary of that source text. So that's an example at the upper elementary level. Here we see Hannah's work is actually of multiple paragraphs. So while we just did one together here on the kinds of elephants, we could do more paragraphs on different topics. So generally Unit 4, and you might jot this down, the length of Unit 4 assignments is 1, 2, or 3 paragraphs. That seems to be the right range. And so this would be a combination. Now you might be looking at this saying, but shouldn't this have an introduction and a conclusion? Wouldn't that be better? And the fact is, we teach that in Unit 8. Unit 7 and or Unit 8, we teach that idea of an introductory paragraph, multiple topic-based paragraphs, and a concluding paragraph. So kind of think of Unit 4 and Unit 6 as just the guts of what will be a more formal essay, a more formal complete report later on. So it's not a product in itself, it's a step in the process of learning. And so if you're concerned about that. Then on page 58 and 59, we have some middle school and upper school samples. And we've tried to show the indicators that are showing this student's level of stylistic checklist achievement so far. So you can kind of peruse those at your convenience. And I think it's good to read student samples. I wish we had time to read them all and talk about them all, but you'll have to do that on your own. We're going to go ahead and proceed now to the practicum, which is to write a paragraph using this outline with the checklist on page 62. Now you've learned the dress-ups, so guess what? You get to practice them. Also, you'll note that because you've learned the sentence openers, as well as the dress-ups drop the because clause. Remember how I said we do that? So there's only 5 dress-ups, but there are the 6 sentence openers. And I think this paragraph is long enough probably to have 6 sentences. And then everything else on the checklist is very similar. So pull out some fresh paper. You're looking a little pale. Would you like to do this one together? Would that make it easier? Okay, tell you what. If you want to do it on your own, because this group writing thing kind of irritates you, you can do it on your own. And if you'd like to do it together with us on the board, we'll just kind of show one way that this could possibly move from an outline into a summary paragraph. So, your choice. Together with us or on your own, I don't mind. All right. Okay, kinds of elephants. Now, remembering a couple things. It's okay to reorganize on the fly. We can change our sentence later, so if we can't think of anything, just put something down and then maybe we'll get more focus. We'll try to use the checklist and check off things as we go. And we want to underline the dress-ups and then put the sentence numbers in the margin so that we practice the indicator system. All right? So, could someone start us off here with the first sentence? Why do I have a nagging hunch as to what's going to happen here?
There are two kinds of elephants, which... Sorry, my vision's not there. Somebody go ahead and finish it for me.
There are two kinds of the larger African and the smaller. I'm going to throw in a word because I just happen to know this fact. Do you think that's okay? Okay.
If it came from the source.
Domesticable Asian. And I wanted to throw in domesticable because what will that count for? Quality adjective. So I'm going to underline that, check it off on the checklist. What sentence type is this? It's a number 1, subject opener. Now, I have met some kind of grammar fanatic types who will argue very strongly that this word there is not the subject of the sentence. So we usually just say it's a subject / catch-all. So if it's not a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or something, you know what it is, just mark it a 1. And so that gives me a little more freedom because I really don't want to get in an argument about what is the subject of this sentence. It's not worth it. So we'll mark it a 1, put a period there, got a comma there. Largest African bull, 13 feet 2 inches. Yes?
I just have a question really quickly about the first
Okay.
sentence. Isn't smaller a banned word?
Not on my list at the moment.
It says little or small
Oh man,
under banned adjective.
you're tough.
Can we change it to petite?
Petite.
The African is larger imply that the Asian is smaller, and so we don't need to say it?
Yes. Diminutive. I could go with that. Petite, no, but diminutive. Yeah. I mean, if you're going to call me on a banned word, I'm going to figure it out. Yes, it is a problem because larger implies that it's larger and the other one would have to be smaller. But you also, it begs some kind of parallel construction there. So it's a tough one. How do you say that? Okay, let's move on. Largest bull, 13 feet 2 inches. Yes, Aaron.
Incredibly, the largest African bull stood 13 feet 2 inches tall in 817.
Incredibly, the largest African bull. What was your verb there? Stood? Stood. 13 feet 2 inches tall. And probably, I'll put that, weighed over 7 tons. Okay. What can we mark here? Okay, it's a number 3 ly opener. I think we could call probably the LY dress up. Anything else? Good enough? Sometimes students might try to claim that stood is a strong verb. And I'm pretty flexible on strong verbs, especially in nonfiction writing, because you don't want to get all fluffy and flowery. If it's not a band verb and it is a verb, and they say this is the one I'm claiming for a strong verb, I pretty much let it go. I won't argue about that. But we might come up with a better one later. So, Jean, you look like you're ready with another sentence for us here.
I'm sorry. I have a ing opener. How about covering their shoulders, or covering their shoulders? The African elephant's ears are 4 feet. Would be long, wide, diameter.
Okay, covering their shoulders.
The African elephant's ears, so it still fits the inging.
African elephant's
ears. So
possessive elephant's ears.
So it's legal.
Yes.
Are 4 feet wide.
Okay.
Span.
Stretch. That'd be a strong verb. Okay.
Span.
Stretch. 4 feet in width. While
the Asian elephants are only half that size.
Okay. We could probably just go Asians plural and ears without saying elephants again, do you think? Asians' ears are half that size.
I don't know if you add and do not cover their shoulders, but that's a long sentence the way it is.
Yeah, plus if they're half that size, they probably don't, so yeah. Okay, very nice. So what we did was we kind of reorganized, right? We said, okay, let's put the ear thingy and this ear thingy together, and that makes more sense, doesn't it? Also, this gives us what sentence opener? Number 4, ing there. We check and be sure the thing after the comma is the thing doing the inging. So the African elephant's ears are covering the shoulders. And you gave us a lovely adverb clause with the word while. So we're doing pretty well here. We've got 3 dress-ups. What do we need? Oh, stretch. What were we going to call that? Strong verb. Okay, so we've got 4. So really all we're going to need is a who which, and we are looking kind of for a prepositional or a clausal or a very short sentence. So we're doing well. All right, let's see. What do we got left here? The African bulls and cows both have tusks. Asian females don't. Asians have the lighter pink-white spot skin. So, yes?
Although African bulls and cows all have tusks, Asians do not.
All right. Although all African bulls and cows have tusks, Asian females most Asian females are tuskless. Is that what you said, or?
I said do not, but that's
Okay.
fine.
We'll go with tuskless. Okay, great. What sentence opener is that?
Number 5.
5. When while where since as if although. So we mark that a 5. We need a 2. We need a 2 prepositional opener or a 6. And we probably need to put in this business about the tushes, right? So how about
Asian females have tushes.
in some cases? Does that work? All right. In some cases, Asian females, let's see, I have to steal some space from over here. Asian females develop short, stunted ivory protrusions, which are, I'm just so sorry, I cannot resist the alliteration, typically termed tushes. Good enough? Now, sentence opener, what do we get? A 2, because in is a preposition. We got one more dress up. What was it?
Who, which?
The who, which. Now, we have another ly word. Should we underline that?
No.
No. We already underlined one ly dress up here, so we can have more than one, but we just don't mark it. That way, when we check, we say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, good to go. 1, 3, 4, 5, 2, we need a 6. So we need a very short sentence. How about this? Asians are more colorful. Would that work? That'd be 4 words. Asians are more colorful, with lighter skin and pink or white spots. They are, I'm writing myself into a corner here. They are what? Help me out. With lighter skin and pink or white spots, they are
Recognizable.
Easily distinguished. How about their species is easily distinguished? Their species is easily distinguished. From? Do you distinguish from?
Among elephants.
Is easily distinguishable.
Could you put easily distinguished from the African?
Do you distinguish from something? Okay, distinguished from their African counterparts? Okay. Cousins. Okay, that gives us a 6. Asians are more colorful. A 2 with lighter skin and pink or white spots. Their species is easily distinguished from their African cousins. And then the last thing we have to do is mark the topic clincher keywords, right? Because we're following that rule. Which words are we repeating? All right, kinds is reflected by the word species. African is repeated. They're African pachyderm cousins. And then, a little bit of a stretch, but pachyderm and elephants. How's that? Good enough? All right, we could labor over it some more and work on it, but you see that's the gymnastics of fitting in all the dress-ups, maintaining the sentence opener variety rule, writing the paragraph with the topic clincher, 2 or 3 keywords repeating or reflecting. All right, so not bad for your first time to do it all. Some of you may have done that by yourself. Again, if you are interested in our instructor accreditation program, where you can actually be given a certificate and listed on our website and say, yes, I'm accredited, you'll need to send in the practicum sessions, this is one of them, with your application. So hopefully you've got it there and you won't have to do much more to polish that up. So, I think we are finished with Unit 4 for now, and we'll take a little break and come back and talk briefly about the decorations, the triple extension sentence patterns, so that we will gradually make it through the entire syllabus of stylistic techniques today. So, 5 minutes, we'll see you back. Okay, we're going to move forward in the syllabus of stylistic techniques with some of the fun ones, the decorations and the triples. This is in the workbook under the style section. The examples are on page 184 and 185. And we also have the poster of the basic 6 decorations. And what I would suggest to you about decorations, a couple things. Number 1, you don't have to wait until you've finished teaching all the sentence openers, all the dress-ups and openers, in order to introduce a decoration. You don't have to. If you want to, you can. But the decorations are kind of fun. The kids take to them very naturally and well. They're things that they are likely to notice when they read other books and things that other people have written. So, for example, in the Student Intensive Continuation course, when we were making that course, I had this little group of grade 3 to 5 children, and we had got all the dress-ups, and we were the number 2 sentence opener. So the checklist was 6 dress-ups, number 2 sentence opener, and I was working with the idea of the story sequence chart and a sequel. So I had this little book called The Cow That Would Not Come Down. It was about Miss Gertrude and her flying cow, right? And she could not get this cow to stop flying. So she tried all number of ways to lasso it and bribe it, and she finally figured out that she made a false cow and lavished attention on the mannequin cow, and the real cow got jealous, came swooping down, smashed the false cow, and never went flying again. So, charming little story. But what caused me to think this would just be so perfect was, on the last page of the book, there was a little cameo picture of a cow riding a tractor. And I thought, this lends itself to a sequel. It's a perfect book for this age children. And one of the notable things that made this book so charming was the author's very skillful use of similes. And Miss Rosemary, Gertrude was the cow, Miss Rosemary's skirt billowed out like a parachute. And just lots of wonderful similes. And I just thought, I can't not teach this right now. So I did. So I introduced to the children the idea of simile. We played with the idea, brought in several examples, and added it to the checklist, even though we had only got to the number 2 sentence opener. And that's just an example of how and when it might be appropriate to jump in and introduce some decorations. All right? The other thing about decorations is that unlike the dress-ups and openers, which we try to do every one in every paragraph pretty much, with the decorations, you would never want to do every one in every paragraph. That would start to become ridiculous. So I explained to the children the decorations are a little bit more like jewelry, right? You can always dress up fully, but too much jewelry at once starts to look a little absurd. So used sparingly, they're effective. There are 6 basic ones we have here to show you, and then what you may discover is that if you teach students for, especially the same students for a few years, there are other literary devices, figures of speech, things like onomatopoeia, that you might introduce, probably in the context of literature that you see it in, and add that to this list of possible decorations. So that idea. We'll just go down the list. They're pretty straightforward. You're probably familiar with them all. Alliteration, by strict definition, is 2 or more words that begin with the same letter or letter blend sound. However, in our system, we require 3. So to be a check-offable alliteration in a story or paper, we would require 3 words in a row or very close together. The alliteration that works best is that which kind of slips in on you, and it's like, that's what I wanted to say anyway, and these words just happen to match. The ones that are painful is when you just wrench the word out of context and contrive it to fit in, so we like to avoid those. But kids can have a lot of fun with this. I will tell you, one of the most enjoyable things that I have ever seen a person playing with alliteration is the parable of the prodigal son, written with almost every single word starting with F. Footloose and fancy-free. You can find this on the internet very easily if you just Google up prodigal son, alliteration, F. And he basically tells the whole story using words that start with F, and it's just overdone to such an extreme it becomes past absurd and into really enjoyably humorous. Written by, I don't know, some pastor in the 1800s or something. So, and it's also got splendid vocabulary, and so I very often use that little story as an example of here's alliteration and here's how to overdo it, and they enjoy that. Clumsily clawed and clambered up the cliff. That works because it makes sense and it has that parallel consonant sound. A question is a decoration when it kind of piques the reader's attention, right? So the rhetorical question, the question asked of the reader. Where lurked the real wolf? Ooh, don't know. Have to read on and find out, right? Who can give law to lovers? Ooh, big philosophical question. Oftentimes, editorials will start with a question. Is the electoral system an outdated relic of a past political idea? Yes. Oh, I don't know. What does the author think? I need to read on to find out. Some professors distinctly do not like college students asking questions in papers. So if your students end up in a college class and that's the professor's attitude, then be sure you don't do it. But in the real world of writing, it can be effective if used carefully. Conversation. Now, sometimes in a story, you would have a lot of dialogue, and that wouldn't really qualify as a conversation because it's just a lot of dialogue. But if you used it a little bit out of context or in a dramatic way, time to come home, rumbled the mother elephant in infrasound, that would work a little better because it's kind of, oh, that's unique. And then you go on into a description of infrasound, and that would be a decoration, a dramatic kind of catch thing. Quotations are excellent for kids to get the idea of using quotations both in their writing and speaking. I know that when I can drop a little quote here or there. It can make people chuckle. It somehow makes me seem well-read or literate or knowledgeable. And so having kids kind of get that habit of maybe collecting up interesting quotes and using them in their writing or speaking. We're talking here about a quotation that would not be an academic one, where you would document MLA format because you quoted. Just something you might say, as Mark Twain noted, history may not repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. Nobody's going to demand a footnote for that type of thing. Now, the next one, I really kind of like this, I guess because I'm a musician, and it has a rhythmic quality to it. But the 3 short staccato sentences. This would be an exception to the rule of sentence openers no more than 2 of the same in a row, because here you're intentionally using 3 very short sentences. However, you would have to be careful you don't do this too often. And certain patterns work kind of a little bit better than others. If you have a parallel pattern, 3 words, 3 words, 3 words, 2 words, 2 words, 2 words, or a descending pattern, 5 words, 4 words, then 3 words, right? 4, 3, 2. That descending pattern, da 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 da, da da da, ba ba, tends to come to a point and be a little more effective than if it weren't. But really, any 3 sentences of 5 words or fewer in a row would qualify as this decoration. It was funny, my daughter Genevieve was in my writing class for a couple of years, and then she went to high school, and she wrote this story, and she put in the 3 SSS as a decoration, and she showed it to me, and she was all happy about it. And then she got it back from the teacher, and the teacher had written in the margin, "too choppy." And so she said, he thought it was too choppy. I said, Genevieve, relax. He didn't know what you were trying to do. And besides, there was nothing else he could mark because it was so perfect. So he had to mark something or he wouldn't have been doing his job. So relax. But, again, knowing your audience. Simile or metaphor, you could teach these separately or together. With young children, they will generally find that young children's books will use the simile, like in that the cow that would not come down. I was always a little confused on this for some reason until one of the very few things that I actually remember from a high school English class was the teacher who explained the difference. And he said it this way. A simile is something that could be true, right? Something can be like something else. But a metaphor is a lie. It's saying something is something which it is not. And now here's the part that made it stick in my brain, which is why politicians prefer metaphor. It's funny how those little tiny humor elements can seal the deal. So that helped, but of course metaphor is, there's nothing wrong or really lying about it. It's more powerful. So, to say, he stood like a statue has one effect. To say he was a statue, slightly more powerful. What's really interesting about teaching stylistic techniques in general is that kids start to notice stuff in the things they're reading that they really didn't notice before. I mean, you can bang your head against a wall trying to get kids to recognize simile or metaphor in poems or stories or classics or something. Teach them to do it and make them try it out a few times, they'll start to see it everywhere. In fact, I had kind of a gratifying moment. One of my children was quite into the Redwall books. Do you remember Brian Jacques Redwall books? And she's sitting in the car with me and we're driving and she's reading one of these Redwall books. I think she read all of them 2 or 3 times each. She was deep into Redwall. She's probably 11 years old, something. And she's reading this book and she finally stops. She goes, "Dad, did Brian Jacques do your writing program?" And I said, "I doubt it, sweetheart." "Why do you ask?" He goes, "Because listen to this." And she read me this sentence, and then she said, "Do you see that? He did a quality adjective, a when, while, where, since, as, if, or although clause, a triple, and a simile all in one sentence." This is one of those things where, this is working. So the kids will start to notice these things. In fact, it'll start at the very beginning. If you've never even taught them about, ly adverb, and you say, put an ly adverb in your Aesop fable, they'll come back to class and say, Mrs. Jones, look, there's ly words in my book I'm reading. There's always been ly words in the book you are reading, but now you notice them. Why? Because you have ownership, right? Last on our decorations here is the dramatic open-close. This would be technically when you begin or end, or both, a paragraph with a very short sentence, right? So you start with a very short sentence, killer bees invaded. Then you can have a topic sentence and some details and clincher, and then you might end with a parallel very short sentence, the nightmare had begun. Right? So this is one exception to the rule that the topic sentence would come first. You might open with a dramatic point. So either or both, beginning or end, would qualify as the dramatic open-close. And one technical detail here, while an ly adverb used as a dress-up cannot double and be an opener, you can't double count those. In the case of the 3 SSS and the dramatic open-close, you would mark those as number 6 sentence openers, and they would count for your number 6 on your checklist if you needed it. So it's just the placement and the specific use. An extension slightly off this idea of the dramatic open and close would apply to longer essays, maybe critiques, term papers, something like that, where you might actually start your paper with a dramatic story, a little scene, a little vignette. And you might also finish it that way. So the dramatic opening paragraph, dramatic closing paragraph, is an extension off that idea. And you'll see a sample here, and a couple of the other samples will have that. So the basic way to teach this is probably to say, introduce one, try it in the next paper. Introduce another one, try that in the next paper. Introduce another one. Okay, now you've got 3. Try in your next paper, if it's 3 paragraphs, one different one in each paragraph. And then add to the list another one until you work up to the 6. And then the minimum rule, as is stated on page 171, is decorations, once you've learned them, one different decoration per paragraph. And the indicator would be, if you're printing, you would print the decoration in italics. If you're writing on paper, you just put DEC in the margin. And so that works. So in your next practicum session, you'll have an opportunity to add to your checklist a decoration and a triple pattern. Let's take a look at these triples on page 186. Now, this is one of these things where once you're this far into it, you hardly have to teach it. You just show a couple samples and say, try it, and they will get the hang of it so fast. There's lots of different ways you can do triple patterns, and so here are a few that you can look at. Word repetition. Now, this stems from an interesting but odd thing that we often feel about language, and that is if you use the same word twice, it doesn't sound too good. Have you ever noticed that? If you use the same word twice in a sentence or too close together, teachers will mark it word repeat, not good. It sounds like you can't think of any other word. But if you use the same word 3 times, at that point it sounds intentional, it sounds stylish. So there's a few examples. I love this statement by Churchill because the word that's repeated is a very small word, but it's just so poignant. Never in the field of conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. I think if you just read Churchill and Shakespeare, you'd have all the great English you'd ever need. It was said of Churchill, how's this for a metaphor? He harnessed the English language and drove it into battle. Dickens is probably considered the master of the triple here. This is from the opening of Tale of Two Cities. Villainy is the matter. Baseness is the matter. Deception, fraud, conspiracy are the matter. That's almost like a triple within a triple within a triple, right? Because he's got three words that are repeated. Matter, matter, matter. And then he's got kind of the three SSS, only he set them off with semicolons. So three sentence pattern. And the third one has that triple noun, deception, fraud, conspiracy, with the conjunction left out. Now, some people accuse Dickens of writing this way because he got paid by the word. But I really do love Dickens, and he really does marvelous triple patterns. I've also been studying Latin a great bit, and our liking of triples evidently isn't specific to us in our time period or our language. It goes all the way back into the ancient patterns of language. There's something about that threeness that we just appreciate. Now, Twain, sometimes taking things to an extreme, did a very interesting quadruple here. With a common origin, a common literature, a common religion, and common drinks, what is longer needful to the cementing of the two nations together in a permanent bond of brotherhood? This was from a speech he gave in London, England, on July 4th. Just think about that for a minute. And Churchill is very famous. This is not the end, it's not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning. So, word repeat thrice, but never twice. That's Webster's way of saying it. If you're going to use a word, you can use it 3 times, but never use it 2 times. So once or thrice, but never twice. Now, you can take actually any of the dress-ups, any of the openers, and make those into triples, right? So, here you have a phrase repetition. They lived in a land where the winter was harsh, where the food became scarce, and where provisions had to be stored. You could also use different clausal openers, right? They lived in a land where the winter was harsh, in a time when food became scarce, and toiled continuously because provisions had to be stored. So you could do a triple clausal with different clausal openers as well. Phrases, prepositional phrases can do it. ING openers, arguing, whining, and pleading with all her charm. You can have 3 in a row there. You can also stretch them out. The caste system has been condemned as serving no useful purpose, being socially harmful, and deserving to be discredited. So INGs make nice triples. Once you get into ly adverbs, adjectives, nouns, and verbs, you get into a territory that's slightly dangerous in that if your words are too close in meaning, they sound redundant and it isn't stylish. So, if you said he quickly, rapidly, and speedily accomplished, that doesn't work because those things are just too close in meaning. So you want to try to help the kids choose words that expand the meaning rather than just repeat it, right? You can put them all together. The killer bees forcefully, repeatedly, consistently push northward, or you could stretch them out. The mouse vigorously gnawed at the tough fibers and tenaciously jerked and yanked at the rope while he continuously assured the lion of escape. So they can be close or spaced either way. The patient, persistent, and personable tortoise. That one's nice because it has the alliteration also, And then repeating verbs can be all together or spaced out as well. So I think those are pretty self-evident. And again, this hardly requires teaching. Once you just show the kids the idea of triple, they will start to play with it. And one thing I mentioned yesterday, but bears reiterating, these are like new toys. You give them a list of a few decorations to try out, you show them alliteration, you show them triples, they may go a little bit crazy, right? And they may just pack this paragraph full of too much. But what did I say this morning? Our goal is not to carve journalists. Our goal is to get kids to fall in love with language. And how do you do that? By playing with it, right? And so it doesn't bother me if I get a paper and I see a student's kind of gone overboard with triples or gone overboard with decorations or whatever the new thing is, because I know that's just a phase, and as they grow up and mature, that will become more natural and controlled and focused. I don't have to teach that. Just growing up will help with that. But what I love to see is when they get excited about what they've written. That's the linguistic marble and the motivation that I so hope for. So that then is completing the basic 4 parts of the syllabus of style: dress-ups, openers, decorations, and triples. Your next checklist will give you a chance to try all of those in your report that you get to write this afternoon. And then there's one more section we'll come back and talk about, and that will be some of the advanced kind of special techniques, advanced dress-ups, secret things that you can keep up your sleeve for the students who need kind of an advanced technique. They're bonus material. So, any questions about anything that I have said so far pertaining to these advanced techniques? No. Pretty straightforward? And you're hungry. So, we'll break for lunch and roll on into Unit 5, Writing from Pictures. So, we'll see you back in an hour.